The sun rose over the Great Mosswoods not with its usual slow, golden grace, but with a jarring, mechanical lurch. Leo the fox sat at the mouth of his den, his head tilted in profound confusion. To his left, a patch of spring lilies sprouted from the soil, unfurled their white petals, turned yellow, and crumbled into grey dust, all in the time it took for him to blink. To his right, a young sapling remained frozen in mid-sway, its leaves locked in a stiff, unnatural pose as if the wind itself had been turned to stone. The rhythm of the world was breaking. The steady heartbeat of the seasons had been replaced by a frantic, erratic stutter. Leo stood, his muscles tensed for danger he could not smell. He trotted towards the centre of the woods, but the very ground beneath his paws felt untrustworthy. One moment he was moving through the crisp air of autumn, the crunch of dry leaves beneath his feet sounding like parchment. The next, he was wading through a sudden, knee-deep snow drift that vanished as quickly as it had appeared, leaving him standing in a puddle of warm summer rain. The forest was experiencing a lifetime of seasons in the span of a morning. The birds were silent, their songs clipped into short, frantic chirps that ended before they could begin. He made his way to the great oak, the ancient anchor of the forest. The tree was suffering most of all. Its bark was groaning, expanding, and contracting with such speed that the sound was like the ticking of a giant, rusted metronome. Leo began to dig. He didn't know why, but his instincts pulled him toward the massive, gnarled roots that sought the very centre of the earth. He pushed aside the rich, dark loam, his claws striking something that did not feel like wood or stone. It was cold hard and hummed with a low, metallic vibration. Buried deep beneath the primary root was a large, brass-cased object shaped like a heart. It was covered in a thick layer of orange rust and choked with emerald moss. Within the casing, gears the size of Leo's head were grinding against one another, throwing off showers of weak, dying sparks. Every time a gear slipped, a flower in the clearing above withered or a tree grew a foot taller. This was the heart of the woods, a mechanical engine built by the ancients to regulate the pace of life. It was failing, its joints dry and screaming for care. Leo nudged the metal heart with his nose. The vibration made his teeth ache. He realised that the gears were locked because of a build-up of grit and age. He needed the oil of patience. The stories whispered by the old tortoises spoke of a spring that sat atop the Peak of Stillness, a place where the water moved so slowly it felt like honey. Only the purest essence of time could lubricate the gears of the world. The journey to the peak was a nightmare of temporal shifts. As Leo climbed the lower slopes, he found himself moving through a corridor of time loops. He would leap over a fallen log, only to find himself back on the other side of it, forced to make the jump again and again. The sky above was a chaotic swirl of day and night, the sun and moon racing across the firmament like frantic fireflies. He had to time his movements with the stutters. He waited for the moments when the world slowed to a crawl, then darted forward with fox-like agility before the forest sped up again. He reached the mid-mountain cliffs, where the air was thin and smelled of ancient ice. Here, the oil of patience was not a liquid in a pool, but a slow-moving sap that dripped from the underside of the frozen glaciers. It was a golden, viscous substance that took an entire hour to form a single drop. Leo sat beneath the shimmering ice, holding a hollowed-out gourd in his teeth. He had to be perfectly still. If he moved, the temporal stutter would shatter the delicate drop. For what felt like an eternity, the fox became a statue. He watched the sun rise and set a dozen times in minutes above him. He He felt the fur on his back grow long and white with winter frost, then shed in the heat of a sudden summer noon. He did not flinch. He practiced the very patience he sought. Finally, the gourd was full of the heavy, glowing amber oil. It smelled of old libraries and slow-growing moss. The descent was even more treacherous. The weight of the oil seemed to attract the temporal anomalies. He encountered a vast zone where the grass grew tall enough to hide him, and then died back to the dirt in seconds. He moved with extreme caution, shielding the gourd with his chin. He saw a butterfly emerge from a cocoon, fly 3 circles, and fall still, all within the span of his shadow passing over a rock. The sight filled him with a quiet, burning urgency. He reached the great oak just as the mechanical heart let out a final, agonizing screech. One of the main gears had ceased to turn entirely. The forest fell into a terrifying, frozen silence. Not a leaf moved. Not a drop of water fell. The world was caught in the gap between seconds. Leo squeezed back into the hole beneath the roots. He tipped the gourd, letting the oil of patience flow over the rusted brass and the grinding teeth of the gears. The oil moved like a living thing. It dissolved the rust on contact, turning the orange crust into a smooth, dark patina. It seeped into the bearings, silencing the screams of the metal. Leo waited. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the heart gave a soft, rhythmic thump whir. The gears began to turn, not with a frantic jerk, but with a majestic, sweeping grace. The vibration changed from a bone-aching hum to a soothing, deep resonance that seemed to travel through the roots and into the very bedrock of the mountain. The fox climbed out of the hole and stood in the clearing. The chaos had ended. The sun stopped its mad dash and hung steadily in the western sky, painting the clouds in a slow, deliberate orange. The lilies that had died did not come back, but new green shoots began to poke through the soil at a pace that I could barely perceive the right pace. The wind returned, a long, cooling sigh that carried the scent of pine and damp earth. Leo watched a snail crawl across a mossy stone. It moved with agonizing slowness, and for the first time in his life, Leo found it beautiful. He trotted back to the great oak and used his paws to carefully push the earth back over the mechanical heart, protecting the secret of the forest's pulse. He patted the dirt flat with his tail, ensuring the engine was safe in its dark, quiet chamber. The forest was no longer a machine out of control. It was a living, breathing garden once more. Leo walked back to his den, his pace steady and sure. He had learned that while the world may sometimes want to rush towards the end of the day, there is a profound power in the slow, the steady, and the patient. He curled up in his bed of leaves, listening to the slow, rhythmic ticking of the woods, and fell into a sleep that lasted exactly as long as a night should. As the morning light settled into its proper, slow-crawling pace, Leo did not immediately return to his den. The forest was waking up in a way that felt fragile, like a sleeper coming out of a long, troubled dream. He stood beneath the great oak, watching the tiny, delicate patterns of the recovery. The first to emerge were the wood turtles, creatures whose very lives were built on the foundation of slow time. They crawled from beneath the ferns, their shells gleaming with the morning dew. Usually, these ancient beings were unbothered by the world, but today they seemed to linger near the roots of the great oak. They didn't speak. Turtles rarely found the need for it, but they leaned their heads toward the earth, sensing the smooth, steady thrum of the repaired heart below. One by one, they looked toward Leo, their blinking eyes full of a quiet, heavy gratitude. Higher up, the squirrels had returned to their frantic, but predictable business. They were no longer popping in and out of existence, or watching their nut piles rot in seconds. They leaped from branch to branch with the sure-footedness of creatures who knew the branch would still be there when they landed. When they spotted Leo, they paused in their scavenging, dropping a single, perfect acorn at the base of his tree, a small, humble tribute to the fox who had restored their future. Leo trotted towards the river, curiosity pulling him to see how the water had fared. The Sylvavine River was no longer a series of jagged, frozen stops and starts. It flowed with a rhythmic, liquid song that harmonized perfectly with the ticking of the forest heart. Along the banks, the animals gathered to drink. A mother deer and her spotted fawn stood at the edge of a pebble-strewn shallow. The fawn, who had been born into the stuttering time, seemed mesmerized by the way the water moved in a continuous, unbroken ribbon. Leo watched as the fawn dipped its nose into the cool stream, drinking without the fear of the water suddenly vanishing or turning to ice. As the sun reached its zenith, hanging exactly where it should be at midday, Leo noticed something shimmering near the river's edge. He approached and found a small, metallic scrap, a piece of the brass rust he had cleared from the heart. He nudged it with his paw, and as he did, he realized he had accidentally uncovered something else beneath a patch of moss. It was a fragment of a map, etched onto a thin sheet of copper that had been preserved by the oil of patience. The lines were delicate, showing a path that led far beyond the Great Mosswoods, toward the whispering peaks where the ancients had built their great machines. It wasn't just a map. It was a promise of more secrets hidden in the gears of the world. Leo took the copper fragment in his mouth and carried it back to his den. He tucked it safely away in a crevice behind his bed of leaves. The forest was quiet now, a deep, resonant silence that felt like home. He curled up, his tail draped over his nose, and as he drifted off to sleep, he didn't dream of the mechanical screeching of gears. He dreamed of the steady, patient growth of the trees and the long, slow journey that still lay ahead of him. The great oak stood as the silent anchor of the world, its roots reaching deep into the memory of the earth. For Leo, the recovery of the forest was not merely a matter of fixing a machine, it was a restoration of the soul. He spent the days following the repair of the heart, wandering the various sectors of the woods, observing how the natural pace of life had settled back into its comfortable, languid groove. The copper map, tucked safely in the shadows of his den, whispered of a broader world. But for now, Leo was content to watch the immediate effect of his labour. He spent an afternoon near the shimmering pools, where the dragonflies had returned to their rhythmic hovering. Before the repair, they had been darting through time so fast they were little more than streaks of blue light, or so slow they fell from the sky like pebbles. Now they hung suspended over the water, their wings a blur of perfect, steady motion. Leo noticed that the flora was reacting with a strange, newfound vigour. The flowers, that had been forced to 1,000 cycles of life and death in a single morning, were now blooming with colours he had never seen before, deep, iridescent purples and oranges that seemed to glow from within. It was as if the oil of patience had not just lubricated the gears, but had also enriched the very soil that surrounded the heart. As he walked, he encountered the old tortoise of the east, a creature whose shell was covered in so much moss he looked like a rolling hill. The tortoise stopped in the middle of a sunlit path, his ancient neck extending slowly. He looked at Leo with eyes that had seen the ancients build the clockwork heart. The tortoise didn't move for a long time, and then, with a deliberate and slow grace, he moved to the side of the trail, clearing the way for the fox. It was a gesture of profound respect. In the language of the slow movers, giving up one's path was the highest honour. Leo trotted further toward the edge of the forest where it met the base of the mountains. Here, the temporal stutter had caused the most damage. The rocks had fractured under the stress of rapid heating and cooling. Large boulders were cracked open like eggs. Leo climbed over these ruins, his paws finding steady purchase on the stone. He found a mountain goat perched on a high ledge, its horns reflecting the steady afternoon sun. The goat let out a resonant bleat, a sound that carried across the valley without being clipped or distorted by a stuttering atmosphere. As evening approached, Leo returned to the clearing of the great oak. He wanted to hear the heart one more time before the night set in. He pressed his ear to the ground, just above where he had buried the brass casing. The sound was no longer a mechanical thump whir. It had evolved into something more organic, a deep, rhythmic drumming that felt like the purr of a great cat. The earth felt warm beneath him. He looked up into the branches of the oak and saw that the owls were preparing for their flight. They moved with a regal, slow-motion elegance. One of the owls, a great grey with feathers like smoke, drifted down and landed on a low branch just a few feet from Leo. The owl watched him, its golden eyes unblinking. It preened a single feather and let it fall. The feather drifted through the air, caught in a gentle updraft, taking a long, leisurely time to reach the forest floor. Leo watched it land softly on the moss. This was the true gift of the oil of patience, the ability to witness the small, beautiful moments that are usually lost in the rush. Leo felt a sense of completion. He headed back to his den, his shadow stretching long and steady behind him. The copper map was waiting, a silent reminder of the vast, intricate world that lay beyond the trees. He knew that one day he would have to follow the lines etched into the metal sheet, to see where the ancients had gone and what other hearts might be failing in the distant mountains. But for tonight, he was just a fox in a healthy forest. He reached his den and lay down, the copper fragment cool against his flank. He closed his eyes and listened. The wind was a steady hum, the river was a constant song, and the heart beneath the oak was a perfect, unwavering beat. The Clockwork Forest was at peace, and so was its guardian.